program is brought to you by Newsworks in cooperation with the Eau Claire Area School Board. This program is simulcast on WRFP-LP 101.9 FM.
All right, I'll call this regular meeting of the Eau Claire School Board to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Secretary Iverson, are we in compliance with the open meetings law?
Yes, we are.
Okay, could we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Bika? Here. Commissioner Hambuck-Boyle?
Here.
Commissioner Harder?
Here.
Commissioner Klinkhammer?
Here.
Commissioner Luganville?
Here.
Commissioner Torres?
Here.
Commissioner Boo?
Here. All right, now that takes us to our public forum. Oh, what did you say? There's no one signed up. All righty. Then moving right on, Superintendent's report. Dr. Hardebeck.
Well, good evening, everyone. I want to review the school board's calendar of events over the next month. There will be regular meetings of the school board on August 6th and 20th, and they will be at 7 p.m. There will also be meetings of the Policy and Governance Committee on August 6th and 20th, and those will begin at 8:45 a.m. and are open to the public. Those meetings will take place in the administration building. On September 11th, there will be a meeting of the Budget Development Committee, and that is also an open meeting, and that will take place at 1 o'clock here in the administration building. I would ask the board to reserve August 27th. It is a Monday. It is the date of our all-staff kind of back-to-school event for staff. It will be held at Memorial, and there will be more details coming to you. We're going to be discussing preparations for that meeting with the principals next week, and we will send times to you. The other thing I wanted to talk about tonight is that I've received questions about some state grants that have been put out to charter schools and to public schools. One is the safety grant, and there have been a number of announcements across the area about the status of those grants and whether or not that money has been awarded to school districts, and it has. We have yet to get a final determination on our grant because we had some questions from DPI about how we would use our safety grant monies with the Eau Claire Academy and also with the school that is established at the jail. So we're in the process of answering those questions, and we expect to hear from DPI shortly after those questions are answered. There was also a school-based mental health grant, a services grant that was awarded recently. That was a competitive grant program. There were proposals from 141 applicants representing 182 school districts and charter schools and requesting more than $8 million. And the grant funds could be used for a variety of services on a continuum from universal wellness activities to an entire school to intensive intervention for students in crisis. We wrote our grant targeted at increasing staff capacity to create a trauma-sensitive environment and to provide training to staff and students to recognize mental health challenges and know how to advocate for themselves and for others. ECASD was notified that we were not awarded this grant, and that notification came to us on July 20th. So that's an update of where we are on the grants. And I know that some of you had a great deal of interest in that. And that concludes my report for now.
Thank you, Dr. Hardebeck. For my report, first I want to say it's good to see everybody again, and I hope you've been having a wonderful summer so far. We would like to schedule a board in-service and board retreat for our second board Monday in September, so that's September 24th. Tentatively starting at 5:15 p.m. We'll take the first bit of that time to take our new board portrait. Topics that have been requested include governance, communication, board member responsibilities, and building relationships between board and administration. And if there are topics that you would also like covered, please let me know and we can incorporate that. There will have to be a brief business meeting for just consent agenda items that night, but that should not take too long. And we're hoping to have our attorney Kirk Strang join us for part of that as well. But if you're not able to make it for that September 24th, please let me know and we'll have to find another time. But that's what we're going to shoot for now. On your desks, you have the documents and, well, you just have the signature sheet regarding the Head Start training, and you should have received an email earlier today. So once you've looked through that, please sign that and give that to Patty. That's required for our federal funding. I want to say a quick thank you to all of our teachers who are helping with our summer school programming throughout the community this summer, and our teaching and learning department and others who've been working a lot on that. I want to let you all know I'm working on scheduling a couple summer school visits, so I'll invite you all to join. And the next one looks like it'll be to our new summer class, the Hmong culture class for middle school students. So I've heard it's been going well, and we'll be visiting that. A couple dates to put on your calendar. August 1st, if you're interested, is the conference for the Wisconsin Public Education Network, of which we are a member. That is in Appleton. We'll be taking a district vehicle to that if you'd like to go. It's a Wednesday. August 1st through the 3rd is the Urban Education Conference. We were invited to attend this as one of the larger Wisconsin school districts. You should have received an email today from the head of the School Board Association, John Ashley, with that itinerary, with those details. But please let Patty know if you would like to attend either or both of those conferences. And that is all I have for my President's report. That takes us to school board committee reports. Do any of our committees have a report they'd like to share? Budget development? You have a, okay.
Yes, budget development met 3 times in the last week, doing some catch-up work, and we have new board members joining us, Commissioner Hammock-Boyle and Commissioner Bika. It's been a great kickoff. We've had an introduction to the budget, state of the current budget development, which culminates in October, as it does every year with board approval, but we're sort of looking at where it's at and where it's heading, and that's been the main work of the last couple of days.
Do we have an update from the LEAP committee? Commissioner Klinkhammer?
Thank you. Yes, we had one meeting since the last time. It's my first one, so it was just a little bit of getting used to that. We had at that meeting we had a presentation by the Indy committee, and we also had visitors there from the Arctic zone, and had just some updates on that.
Great. And congrats on being the new chair.
Thank you.
Oh, my microphone's off. I apologize. I said Joint Commission on Shared Services. The only update I have is I'm setting up a time to meet with the City Council President and County Board, Acting President, and the County Board Chairperson to talk about getting some regular meetings of that scheduled once again. So looking forward to doing that in the coming year. And that's it for committee reports, and I understand we do not have a legislative update, so that will take us to the consent agenda. I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes of 6.2, so the minutes of June 4th, 2018, the minutes of closed session June 4th, 2018, the financial report May 2018, gifts in the amount of $35,720.40 for the period of June 1 through June 30th, 2018, payment of all bills in the amount of $5,074,460.57, and net payroll in the amount of $3,570,309.25 for the period of May 1st through May 31st, 2018. Payment of all bills in the amount of $12,007,821.48, and net payroll in the amount of $3,717,775.80 for the period of June 1st through June 30th, 2018. The approval of 2017-18 budget adjustments, the Human Resources and Employment Report, additional notice requirements and actions for school districts due to 2015 Wisconsin Act 55, revisions to policy 411.1, student sexual harassment. So I would entertain a motion to approve 6.2 through 6.12.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Just 1 point, I think you missed 6.5.
Oh.
The gifts for me.
Oh, thank you. So yes, this will include 6.5 gifts in the amount of $28,227.68 for the period of May 1 through May 31st. We don't want to forget those gifts. Thank you, Commissioner Torres. Are there any other comments? Okay, so we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, and we'll do a roll call vote for this.
Commissioner Klinkhammer,
Agree.
Commissioner Luganbill, Commissioner
Yes.
Torres,
Yes.
Commissioner Vu,
Yes.
Commissioner Bika. Yes. Commissioner Hambuck-Boyle,
Yes.
Commissioner Harder.
Yes.
All right, that takes us to Dr. Hardebeck. She has a little announcement to make.
I think I have a big announcement to make.
Big announcement.
So with the approval of the employment report, you also approved the appointment of Heidi Newman-Neeland as the new principal of Putnam Heights Elementary School. So Heidi, would you please stand? Heidi joined the Eau Claire Area School District in 2012 as the literacy coach at Meadowview Elementary. She is also currently an adjunct professor at UW Stout for the 316 Reading License Program. Prior to joining the ECASD staff, Heidi taught third grade in Minneapolis, Minnesota, was a Title I teacher and family involvement coordinator for the Chippewa Falls Area Unified School District, and was an elementary principal in both Hindram, Minnesota, and Fertile, Minnesota. I think Heidi demonstrated to the panel that she's passionate about education, and she expressed passion for lifelong learning with her own continued growth and education. She talked about the power of collaboration and communication, always with students at the center of decisions. So Heidi, we welcome you to your new position, and we look forward to your leadership at Putnam Heights.
Welcome. Next, this takes us to our individually considered resolutions. We have our iPad replacement. So I would, if there are any, is there a brief report? Okay.
Good evening. I'm mostly here for questions in case you have some. I know that we shared real briefly with the Budget Development Committee last week the need for the purchase for the iPads. Obviously, we're bringing this to you because it's such a large purchase. These are refreshing current iPads that were purchased back in 2014. So these are 4 years old, which is they're pretty much end of life to us, and no longer supported right now. By support, meaning any new applications and things like that are really, especially the ones that support our state testing, are not being developed anymore for these iPads. So once we get to state assessment season in the spring, these current devices will not be able to support those assessments. These iPads currently exist in grades 3, 4, and in grade 6 at DeLong. There was a purchase plan 4 years ago that started with DeLong at the 6th grade, and then the following year was grade 5, and then the rest of 6th grade at South and North Star. So the purchase price for this one is just simply to refresh that first set for grade 3, 4, and then grade 6 at DeLong. I think actually I would take any questions. Oh, so one more thing about the need for the purchase now. If we can approve this at this meeting, we have the opportunity then to put a purchase in place this week and hopefully get them in place by the beginning and start of the school year. If we don't, that just becomes a little more problematic for us because students that use current devices, the state testing is in the spring. So we have time until then. But if if the devices come to us later, students will have used the old devices and will typically have pictures and other content on there. And it's just a little bit more difficult to transfer that information from one device to the next device consistently so that no one loses anything. The plan, there's typically, if you or I do it at home, we can do that, but typically with students, you're going to have a hiccup here and there, and that usually leads to a little bit of angst for our student population that we'd like to try to avoid. Did you have any questions?
Any questions from board members? Commissioner Humbuck-Boyle.
I just, for the rest of the board, as far as the explanation about the phase-in
Yeah.
piece, just, do you want to share that a little
Yeah,
bit?
so we have, James Martin and his team have put together a phased-in approach. So we, rather than purchasing all at once, like we hope that next year, then we can do those 5th grade and the rest of 6th grade iPads. We also have some devices at the middle schools and high schools that are more like Chromebooks or Hewlett-Packard Streams or similar type devices. And again, we want to phase those in. Obviously, these are coming, we're right on the fine line of being able to utilize these devices consistently. And so we're going to try to stretch them as far as we can. So we do have a plan to try to phase that in over time rather than try to do them all at once. It is also important to note that this coming year, and this fiscal year, the state does provide a $125 grant back to the district per device that we purchase. That is based on our 9th grade enrollment. It's not necessarily intended for 9th grade students. They just use 9th grade enrollment as the basis, cost basis for the grant. So up to $125 per device that they'll, based on, up to the number of 9th graders you have. So if you do the 9th grade enrollment, it gets us to about $95,000, which is where that number in board docs came from.
Any other questions? Commissioner Torres.
Just out of curiosity, what happens to the equipment that is phased out? It still can be used, right? Not for testing, but...
No, a very small number of them can be used for research and development projects, use them as cameras or other devices. But we also have an offer which is not included. I did include that on the revenue end, or in the board docs, the net here that we get back. But based on the status of the device, we can receive money back on the purchase of the devices back. So that net cost to us can actually be a little bit better, but we don't, until they actually see the devices, we don't actually have a guarantee on that. So some of them are sold back. We have a couple different options. One is selling them directly back to Apple and or a wholesaler. The other options, we could send them out to auction. And given that opportunity, James Martin would work with Scott Nofke to determine the best and most efficient and cost-productive plan for the district.
Okay, thank you.
That is the question of selling back, or what we would do. That was my question. And the other one would be, do we get some sort of a discount with Apple currently?
Yeah, they do. It's a real tight sales market. We do get a small, first of all, we get a discount for volume purchasing. Anytime you're purchasing in bundles of 10 or more, you do get a discount per device. We sometimes do get very small discounts in addition, but it's a pretty tight margin that to work with. But periodically, we can get some small discounts through them. It's a little bit different than working with other markets like the Windows market, which has a lot more competition.
Commissioner Humbuck-Boyle.
I just wanted to make the comment and thank the administration, technology, Mary Ann, for phasing this in and being so sensitive to the budget right now. So thank you.
Are there any other questions, comments? Okay. Do we have a motion on the floor, Secretary Iverson?
We do not.
Okay. So I would entertain a motion to approve this.
So
move.
Go ahead.
Do you want to
Second, yep.
Okay. Let's do a roll call vote for this with the cost associated.
Commissioner Klinkhammer,
Yes.
Commissioner Luganville,
Yes.
Commissioner Torres,
Yes.
Commissioner Boo,
Yes.
Commissioner Bika. Yes. Commissioner Hambuck-Boyle,
Yes.
Commissioner Harder.
Yes.
Okay, and our last piece on individually considered is, I'll be brief, but first I'd like to entertain a motion to approve our resolution declaring the last Friday in July as System Administrator Appreciation Day in the ECASD. So Would someone like to make that motion?
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
Second?
Okay. And just for the sake of discussion, I'll just share the nationally, the last Friday in July is System Administrator Appreciation Day. And I thought it would be a nice gesture coming from the board of appreciation for our technology department and IT staff for the work that they do that often goes under the radar, and it's supposed to, but really appreciate that work because we literally couldn't do pretty much anything without them. So, so let's vote, and then I can just share this, and then I'll ask the technology folks to come up too, so we can recognize them. Let's just do a voice vote on this. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no? Okay. So I'll just read this quickly. I'll go up there, and I'll ask the technology folks, if there are any in the audience, to come up with me. So the resolution reads, whereas the ECASD Technology Department provides leadership throughout the district for a wide range of technology-related initiatives, the team collaborates to develop, lead, and facilitate district staff development, in-service and training, managing and implementing complex technology-related projects which support the district's goals and priorities. Whereas the ECASD Technology Department has made significant gains in providing equity, security, and reliability through the district's technology infrastructure. This includes fiber optic cabling, which has upgraded our connection speed between sites to be 10 times faster and has an anticipated return on investment in 3.6 years and a savings of $65,000 per year. Whereas the Technology Department has continued to build on its focus on data security with new investments in network and internet firewalls, intrusion monitoring, security audits, policy reviews, web filtering software, redundant phone system servers, and building communication systems. And whereas the Technology Department continues to invest in student-centered learning, and our district has expanded access to iPads and Chromebooks for students and piloted the Canvas program in over 13 schools in the district. And whereas July 27th, 2018 is the 19th annual Systems Administrator Appreciation Day, which was established to show appreciation for the work of system administrators and other IT professionals. So therefore be it resolved that the school board shall henceforth recognize the last Friday in July as Systems Administrator Appreciation Day throughout the Eau Claire Area School District. And I know that we don't work on Fridays in the summer, so this Friday I hope you have a big party, and let me know if you're anywhere where I can buy you a drink on Friday. You let me know. But I thought it'd be nice if you just want to come up and talk to us and tell us who you are and what you do, and if you have anything else that you'd like to say. So come on up.
Good evening. My name is James Martin. I work as the Director of Technology for the district, and I have the opportunity to lead an incredible team. Just as Mr. Schmidt spoke about the generations of technology and the iPads that move forward, so we move forward upon previous generations' work. So many of the things that were highlighted here we are all a part of, but we are standing on the work of others. So it certainly isn't just the current team in place. We need to celebrate the history of what has gotten us here also. So we have here tonight Marina Dalkey and Cindy Shannon. If you guys would like to come up and briefly just introduce yourself.
Good evening. I'm Marina Dalkey. I work mostly at this building, down in the basement. I'm a technician.
Good evening. I'm Cindy Shannon, and I am a field technician. I've cover 5 of our buildings in this district, and it's a delight because I get to meet so many people and help them across the board, because I'm the one that you call when it doesn't work.
Well, again, I just want to thank you and commend you, and we're very proud and very happy that you're in our district. And I like that you mentioned the basement, because we do have, tell me what the acronym is again. It's called the NOC, and it's Network Operations Center. Okay, so it's the the hidden part of our building here. And so I think we all have to take a board tour and visit it. But thank you very much to the Technology Department for all the work that you do. And now we'll celebrate this every last Friday in July. So thanks.
So as President Luganville is making his way back to his chair, Mr. Schmidt, can you talk a little bit about the technology department and how many people are serving in that department? Because we just saw a very small representation tonight.
We have 25, I think, members across the district. 23, okay.
Great.
So there's cost savings of 2 people right there. So actually, so the group is, there's a couple of different pieces. There's the NOC here, which
Yeah.
is that nerve center. But as Cindy mentioned, we actually deploy many of our staff by zones within the district to provide zone support. So Cindy supports one of those zones. And Marina, when she's not in the basement, is supporting another one of the zones in our district as well. I also think that actually your choice of Friday is an excellent one in the summer because what their staff will do periodically is for some of them, they'll rearrange our schedule so that they can work on Friday to do maintenance for the district and upgrades to provide the least interruption so that the day-to-day workings go on without us noticing. So like a good conductor, like a good referee, they do really great work when we don't even notice. So they continue to do a lot of stuff under the veil of our consciousness, but they are really doing a wonderful job.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you, truly. And I really want to challenge us as board members and administrators to celebrate what we do a little bit more each month, because there are amazing people in our district doing amazing things every day, every hour, and it's good to take time to recognize that. So thank you. Next up on our agenda, we'll adjourn from the individually considered resolutions section of our meeting and enter committee reports. And our first committee report is an OPEB listening session update. So, Ms. Johnson, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. So tonight, my presentation really gives you a brief overview on the listening sessions that we've had so far, what are some of the information that we've received, some of the questions that have been asked, and what do we have answers for so far. So just as a reminder, we have held 3 listening sessions since we last met. They were July 11th, July 12th, and July 16th. And the information presented was the same information that was presented to the board on April 18th. We also provided the attendees a sample letter with their personal projections based upon the information that we had included in what was presented to the board. And if those employees were unable to attend the listening sessions, those letters were mailed to the employee's home address last week. And then we also allowed for time for questions, concerns, and any further explanation if needed at the end of the meetings. Just to give the board a feel for the attendees, you can see that our first listening session had about 70 attendees, our second had 56, and our third one had 77. So it was a total of 203, which is almost a third of the people that would be impacted by that change. One of the things that we added to the presentation after the first 2 was we got a lot of questions from staff on, I don't know how to calculate what my current benefit is. And so we added a sample calculation so that way then they could take what their current health and dental plan is and multiply it out times the, we just went in full years and then in the number of years and age till Medicare eligibility. We thought that that would give them a tool so that way they could go back and try to calculate that because that wasn't contained in the letter. The other thing that we talked a lot about was just the comparison of the old plan to the new plans that we're looking at and how significantly different it is based upon which health insurance plan you have. So in this slide, you can see for a person who's currently carrying a single health insurance plan, the value of their current benefit is about $80,000. If we look at the Tier 2 and Tier 3 options, those amounts grow under Option A to $168,750, under Option B to $150,000, and then C to $75,000. So if I'm a single employee, this is attractive because the benefit is not tied to my health and dental, which has a lower value. If we look at that same comparison, but for an employee that carries an Employee Plus plan, Employee Plus would be Employee Plus Spouse or Employee Plus Child. And so again, if we look at their current benefit under our current OPEB plan, that value is about $169,000. If we look at the scenario or tier 2 under scenario A, that benefit goes to $168,750 plus $2,500 for each additional year of service provided to the district. Under scenario B, it goes to $150,000, and scenario C, $75,000. Hopefully you noticed that the last slide, the numbers for tier 2 and scenario C were exactly the same. And that's because we're taking out that health insurance component and valuing everybody's service the same based upon their age and the current years of service to the district. Then if we look one more time at the family plan, this is one where you'll see a bigger difference. The current benefits for a family plan is just over $206,000. And then their benefits, again, are exactly the same for tier 2, scenario A and B and C, because we're taking out that piece that's tied to the health and dental insurance. And so again, each of these scenarios was for a teacher that had met eligibility age by June 30, 21, who's currently 55 and would retire with 30 years of service to the district. Obviously, there's lots of variations, but I thought it would be important to show examples of how different it is because our current plan is based upon our health insurance premiums. Another question that came up a lot was, well, I'm a married couple in the district. How does this impact me? And so we didn't have this slide at the presentations because it was something that we hadn't really kind of narrowed down. And so I thought it was important to share this with the board because that question came up at every listening session. And so again, on the top part of this slide, you can see that we have spouse number 1 who is currently carrying the health and dental insurance, and then spouse number 2. So you can see under tier 1, scenario A, the total benefits for this married couple in the district taking a family plan would be about $237,000. That's different from what we saw before because the district pays the entire premium for that married couple. If we look at if they would qualify and didn't retire under the current scenario and went to option tier 2 on scenario A or scenario B, you can see for them scenario B would be a total of $337,500 and scenario C is $150,000. The reason for that difference for scenario B is the fact that you're looking at them individually and it's not tied to one health and dental plan anymore. And so when I actually sat down and looked at the numbers, I'm like, oh, this is actually not as big of a difference as what we were expecting. And I think I had a couple of people that were in the audience that came up to me and said, hey, is this really what my number is? And looking at the information, they had kind of figured it out for themselves as well. And so, again, those numbers, the scenarios, I'm just looking at what do we know for the earned benefits. And each additional year that they work, there's an additional contribution. So that amount just gets bigger. One of the questions that was raised was how many employees actually take our plans right now. So there's a lot of numbers on here, but basically we've got 397 teachers that take health insurance, 216 hourly that take it, and 39 non-affiliated employees that currently take it. Dental's a little bit different because not everybody, I guess in this case it's all exactly the same. I was expecting some differences because not everybody might take a health plan and a dental plan. And those are the same numbers that are of the employees that are impacted. So I think it's 652 total when you add them all together. So some more of the common themes that showed up in the listening sessions and questions we received. Lots of questions about the stipends. What about if my birthday falls in July and August and I'm just outside of that grandfather period? How does that impact me? If I retire in this coming school year, the 2018-19 year, which benefit do I receive? Married couples we just talked about. How long do I need to have district insurance to get the current benefit? How many people are in the grandfathered group? How many people in total will this impact? Why does there have to be a change? And why didn't you put the current benefit on my letter? So a lot of these I've already addressed in previous slides, but from the stipends, we've shared at all 3 listening sessions that all of our proposals here are just for health and dental, that the stipends aren't being addressed at this time. To answer the question about the July and August birthday, we said we would have to work with HR because I'm sure we have a practice in place, and so we would want to work with them just to say here's how it would look for you, and that would be an individual conversation. The question about if I retire in the 18-19 year, what benefit do I receive? We indicated at this point, we assume you'll get the same benefit because no changes have been made. And then I think we've covered the rest of them previously. Some more questions that were common and kind of came up at all three sessions were, why are you forcing me to retire? And what if I want to continue to work past the grandfather period? So that question is, I'm eligible to retire, but maybe I'm not ready to stop working. And so what happens if I don't? And so that was a common question. Another question was, why isn't the defined contribution the same for everyone going forward? If we're changing the earned benefit to be the same for everybody, why is the defined contribution different? And what they are talking about is that the current defined contribution is $2,500 per year of service for a teacher. It's $800 a year for non-affiliated in our proposal, up to a maximum of $25,000. And then it's $500 per year for classified, up to a maximum of $15,000. So there you can see that there is a big difference, and that was one of the questions I think Commissioner Humbach-Boyle received that as well a few times, as to if we're looking at equitable, why wouldn't that also change and be the same? And that was negotiated when the defined contribution plan was implemented, and so I don't think we really dug into that conversation. We were just trying to make it the same as what the current defined contribution is. Lots of questions about the insurance rate. Why would we lock in the insurance rate? And why don't you cap the plan that I can retire with? Somebody said if the family plan is causing a greater benefit and not many people retire with a family plan, why wouldn't we lock, and give the greatest benefit just to a limited family, and you couldn't have anything beyond that? I think we maybe talked about that at one point, but I think the desire was to really just get away from being tied to health and dental and the unknown fluctuations of the premiums every year. We had a few questions about if this was legal and how can we do this. We heard from several people that wanted a contract to say that this wouldn't be changed in the future. And so we tapped into a little bit about the fact that, with Act 10, that option comes back to the board to review and be able to make changes if they so desire. And that we wouldn't put that into a contract because that's a benefit and the board can choose to change benefits if they desire. Question about how many districts have actually changed the OPEB plans. What happens if I die? And can listening sessions be employees addressing the school board? So what I've got on my next slide is answers to the questions that I have so far. I reached out to our actuary after we got the question about how many districts in the state have changed their plans. Our actuary is aware of 2 districts in the state that haven't changed their OPEB plan at all. So when you think about 424 districts and they're aware of 2, that tells you that this has been on everybody's mind and everybody's radar. Here in Eau Claire, we did implement the defined contribution plan either in 2008, 10, or 12 based upon the hire date. But what's causing a problem and a concern for us is that even though we have that grandfathered group, because it's tied to that health and dental and that cost of insurance and the unknown increases, that's still making our liability larger than we can afford at this point in time. And so even though we have a closed group, it's just still very expensive to us. And I think that speaks volumes when we talk about 652 employees that are potentially impacted by this change. That's almost half of our current staff. And then again, just to reiterate, we've got 397 teachers that are currently eligible, 216 and 39 non-affiliated. After one of the last presentations with the board, I was asked to get some information about looking at 2 changes to OPEB scenario B. And so B1 is the difference is that a 5-year grandfather, so extending that retirement date out to June 30, 2023, and then adjusting that factor range from a 1.0 to a 2.0. There was some discussion and question about in scenario B, the factor range is less than what a current employee receiving the defined contribution would get, and we didn't want to do that. We wanted to value them all the same. Tier 3 was exactly the same under scenario B1. We looked at this at budget development a little bit last week, and so I know the numbers are really hard to see, but I'll just give you the quick version. So when we reviewed scenario A before, that was about a $42 million savings over the 30 years of our projected liability. When we looked at B, that was about a $50 million savings. And when we looked at C, that was a 57. And so what I found very interesting is when we got B1, it's actually a larger savings by about $2 million than scenario B. And so I asked the actuaries, I said, why would that be different? Because we were expecting it to be not as large of a change and not as large of an impact. But because we're extending that grandfather period by 2 years, we have more people falling into that. And so that fixed group, it kind of shifts out of B or tier 2 into tier 1. And so that's what's creating the projected difference over the 30 years of that liability. And so I can break it down into more detail. I just wanted to give a high level as to what the actuary kind of told us that. And then I have a slide that really summarizes that. And the other difference in B1 as well is that our current OPEB ends at Medicare eligibility age, and tier 2 and 3 in the new plan are paid out at retirement, and that could go beyond Medicare eligibility age if someone chose to work longer. So next steps and some questions that I have is what do we want the fall listening sessions to look like? Number one, I'm wondering about the format that was brought up from the listening sessions. You know, should it look different, and can we tell our stories to the school board? And then how many sessions? I know earlier we had talked about maybe 5, and wondering if that was still kind of our target number so we can start planning. And then I would also ask for additional information that you need to help make a decision or any further clarifications that we can provide for you. And so now I'll open it up for your questions and discussion.
Dr. Harbeck?
Before we move on, I think it's important that we put this discussion in some type of context and to remind the board of why we began these conversations as far back as 2012. And I think even before then, for those who were here before that time. Currently, our OPEB benefits account for 4.2% of our overall budget. And in recent years, the amount spent on OPEB has been relatively flat, even decreasing slightly depending on the number of employees who retire each year. However, our bonding agencies are still concerned about the amount of the OPEB obligation, and I think this is probably easily understandable when you know that other school districts have taken steps to reduce that obligation. So in an effort to continue to receive preferred short-term and long-term rates, we've been advised to try to get our annual OPEB payments down to approximately 3.5% of our annual budget, and to try to reach this goal within the next 10 years. So that's quite an amount of time that we have to work on this. By starting the discussion now, we're looking to minimize the effect on our employees, and we want to continue to offer a high-quality education to our students. So this is kind of the overall umbrella of why we started looking at the OPEB costs at this time.
Commissioner Humbuck-Boyle?
So I think it came out too in the listening sessions that they did want to have what we were entertaining with the different options or scenarios with what they have now. And so I think it would be important to cost out because it is decreasing, and we are seeing the benefit of what we've done in the past with OPEB and what our staff has done and worked hard to get that down. So I guess for me, I'd like to see what that looks like out over time. I want to see if it is cost effective, because if it is coming down, I would like to know what that is.
I'd like to just ask for some clarification,
Yep.
and I know you can't read this very well. But so on the very left-hand side, all of the white columns, that is our current, what we've got right now. And so it talks about the current benefits and the current benefits. So it's our current retirees, so people that have already retired, and then the projections for the current benefits for our active employees. And so you can see that
So-
bottom number is 112 million. Mhm.
But if you look at that over time in the next 10 years, I'd like to see, I mean, that's what it is now, right? Presently.
That's what it is now.
And
Yeah.
under the same system, if we didn't do anything, I'd like to see what that could look like over the next 5, 10
If
years.
we don't do anything, that is what it's going to look like based upon our population at the time the actuarial study was done.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it'll change slightly. We have to have our actuarial study updated for DPI every 2 years. And so this information is based upon the data that we provided for them, because we will be getting an updated study this fall.
So it's almost twice as much when you look at the others over time.
Almost twice as much as the bottom line?
Yep.
Yes,
Yep, got
that
it.
is correct.
Okay. I wanted to make, can I make one more statement? Is if you look then at the, our district and what we are below the state average per pupil, even after referendum, and that keeps increasing every year, I just wanted to point out that the deficit that we're looking at in order to continue OPEB, if we would get per pupil what other districts get, or even above the state average like other districts, we wouldn't be looking at it this way. So I just think it's important for people to, I mean, we might still be looking at it, but we would be working with different numbers.
It could be. Yeah, I don't know for sure, but it definitely could make a difference.
I'll just say, could you go to your slide with the questions for? So one thing I'm interested in, when in our communications with the staff, and with the email address that's been set up, it's really to solicit their questions and their feedback to the proposals that have been shared. Have we communicated the interest or desire in their ideas? And I know that there obviously are some limitations with how a governing board such as ours can do that in a post-Act 10 world, but I know that there are ways that you can do that, just soliciting their, do you have suggestions to improve this, or whatever. But has that been communicated, any of it? Because that's something that I think moving into the fall, now that people have had some time to look at this and chew on it, I think to have that opportunity as well would be, just by phrasing it in that way, would bring a different perspective and would potentially bring out different people. So I'm just thinking about that. Just moving into fall, that's one, as far as format, that's one piece that I think could be beneficial for us. Commissioner Hombuck-Will?
That did come up. I mean, that did come up from people that came to the listening sessions on doing something like that. So, thanks.
Do other board members have comments or questions? Commissioner Harder?
Yeah, I think having gone through this, spending quite a little bit of time over the last year, right, going over this, I think we've kind of worked out a lot of the details of this particular plan, and for me, the question is less about tweaking it and where do we save a little more, earn a little, pay a little more, or save a little more. Those are important questions, but the really important variable for me is how is the staff receiving this. And so if we feel like there's a chance to get a little more out of that by changing the format, I would be in favor of that. But what form it actually takes, I don't know. The idea of getting ideas from the staff, I think, is a good one. We just, as I understand it, we just need to be clear we're not negotiating, which we're not. And so, but again, how exactly we would structure that is maybe another question. So.
I'm wondering as well, as far as listening session format, I think we know that there's not going to be any way we're going to be able to hit everybody through this in person. So I know we have the email set up. I think it would be beneficial for us to look towards a survey as well, and perhaps the budget committee could do some looking at what the survey language could look like. But since you're meeting a lot, it seems, you could add this. The other piece, I think, would be a web tab, where, and maybe it doesn't need to be on just the ecsd.us, maybe it can be in the SharePoint for in-district staff to view it, but just to view kind of the various materials that were at the sessions if they're not able to be there, and also a place for them to perhaps view an FAQ, because I think that's the other piece of this, that we're getting questions as board members. The same questions are being sent to the OPEB email address, which are also being sent to you, which are also being sent to payroll, which are also being sent to human resources. So figuring out a streamlined way to have so that we're not getting any misinformation out there, and we're able to effectively answer people's questions. So I think having a website with an FAQ and kind of a central location to get that information would be helpful, I think, for all of the various departments as well as the board. Commissioner Humbuck.
We could pattern that after how we did that for the referendum. You know, that was helpful.
And then you'd asked the question, Ms. Johnson, about having some had expressed an interest in doing a listening session with the school board. Could you explain what that?
Yeah, yep, they asked if the roles could be reversed, and so the school board, they could address the school board and share their stories. That was maybe at the first listening session, I think, and there was a lot of support for that, and so I just said that I would bring it here, and, you know, I think as Commissioner Harder was saying, you know, what does that format look like, and is that an option, would be something that we would need to figure out, but that was the request.
Okay. I think perhaps once we're a little bit further along in the fall and we've had some more listening sessions and other outreach, then maybe when things are a little more refined, bringing it to us. I don't know what other people's thoughts are, if they'd like to do that sooner or bring it later. I mean, I think it's a good idea. And certainly I'm sure it was expressed to them in the sessions that even, you know, we couldn't have more than 3 board members at any of them, but that the notes could be sent and will be sent to all of us. So I don't know if that was shared with them. That's good. So go ahead.
I think that there's certain groups, I don't know, of people that fall in these certain groups, and I think those are the people that want to share their story and how it impacts them.
Sure.
And they're probably the people, too, that have maybe some ideas on how it can be tweaked as well. Because there were several, you know, people turning such and such an age by such and such a date. I've gotten a couple letters like that, too, explaining where they would fall or what that would look like. And I think they want to be heard in the sense of what that looks like, and maybe that might inform us, too, in some of our decision-making, depending on what that looks like. So that kind of came up that way, too.
Commissioner Bika?
So I'm wondering about what would be more effective, oral or written? So could we simply solicit this information just in a written format? I don't know if it's a survey mechanism, yep. Or the OPEB address seems a little bit, it's uncertain to me as to maybe as a staff member what I would send to that, but if we made it clear this is for you to share your story, then you might get even more participation if it was just written.
I did share that with several people who wanted to do that, and they have submitted it. We had several submitted even today yet. I saw a couple already. Yeah, and you would have gotten them as well. Yep, so that, yep.
I agree with you, though, Commissioner Beek, about the survey piece. I think that is worth looking at. I think that I want to make sure, what I mainly want to make sure is that our staff are able to express themselves, express their views, share ideas in the way that's the most comfortable for them. And for some, I think a listening session is the most comfortable. But I think that others would prefer perhaps some anonymity or to be able to share things privately. And I want to provide avenues for both of those that will have an equal weight with board members as well, and with all of us making our decision. So, do you, from this, do you have kind of a clear idea of what we're looking at here moving forward? Okay.
Yeah, I think so. I think that this gives us some ideas, and we can come back
Yeah.
and work with administration to figure out what does that look like.
Okay. Do any other board members have comments, questions, ideas? Okay. Because this is a committee report, any members of the public? No? Okay. Well, thank you, Ms. Johnson, and I'm sure we'll be talking about this again soon, so. Okay, next is our student engagement survey. And it looks like we have Mr. Schmidt.
Good evening. This is the annual student engagement survey that we do with our students each school year. I believe this is our 5th year doing the survey, and so it's given in late March through early May. We choose that time, ironically, from our earlier discussion with the state testing, when we start to get devices with each, because students are already doing some of that state testing, and so we kind of tie this process into that as well, because we sort of have some interrupted class time. So we between the technology and the assessment staff, we conduct that during that time period. This is not a census survey. This is actually we try to corral every student we can. We typically have between 92 and 95% response rate. This year is a little bit lower, it's 92%, but it's still considered quite a strong response rate. If you think about this, when we talk about some of our family surveys and things like that, those are typically down around 20%. So this is a pretty high return rate, and so we feel pretty confident about the data that we have. The end value, or the number of students that actually responded, we were within about 18 students of last year, however. So one of the things that we did this year, our number of students responding was about the same. Now, our enrollment didn't go down, so what happened this year is, in the past, our response rate was a little bit higher, but we also had excluded certain students from being, they were typically weren't in our building as much. So this year we tried to go after as many students as possible, so even though our percentage is down a little bit, our actual number of students responding was pretty similar to last year. So just to make sure we're all on the same page, this is very similar to last year. Student engagement is that connection between students with their school and their studies. And so our partner in this K-12 Insight has worked with us to separate this from cognitive engagement and social emotional engagement. We think about our strategic plan. Priority area 1, academic achievement. Priority area 2, social and emotional growth. So it's very good that, nice that their survey is more in line with our strategic plan under those first 2 bullets. And of course, on the partnership with families, we have, so the first 2 priorities areas are obviously quite clear, but then also identify and implement innovative partnerships focused on assuring post-secondary success. So part of the survey is really having our students look at, do they see their success, do they see themselves and some alignment between their work and their future aspirations. And so we'll get into those items in just a moment. So why measure student engagement? And this, I shared this with you last year as well. The why is a really important why. But there's a little bit more that we know this year than we did last year. So when I spoke to you last year, that was right before we started to engage with the National Center for Education Statistics regarding social and emotional learning. This has been a journey as a teaching and learning department, but also you as a board, I understand it. This has been this is high on your priority list. You're not alone. You're seeing this in your journals, but you're also hopefully seeing the struggles with this as well. I'm going to read you a few quotes and some background regarding what we've learned in the last year in terms of social and emotional measurements. Our state, DPI, has come out recently with some social and emotional competencies. It's a very nice document. It was guided in large part from the Collaborative for Academic and Social and Emotional Learning, better known as CASEL. CASEL's acronym, CASEL. They have a site, casel.org. It's a wonderful site. They're pretty much the gold standard for social and emotional learning and really trying to integrate that with academics. And so our state really modeled and continues to model their work off of CASEL. And so if you go onto the Wisconsin Department, if you Google DPI Wisconsin SEL, you'll get right to the site and you'll see CASEL all over the place. So really when you're looking at the CASEL work and DPI's work, you're seeing a very integrated effort. And so on there, there's actually a webinar, and if you go on there and you can listen to it, so if you're someone like me, we enjoy listening to these webinars. And so if you go on there, right around 12 minutes and right around 24 minutes on this webinar, there's a couple spots where I backed up, and I actually wrote this down to talk to you about the challenge in front of us. And they both, and the woman from DPI was talking about the work with CASEL, and CASEL and DPI, and she said they concur not to assess social emotional learning in any way that will be attached to accountability, because we really don't have good tools to do that yet. So DPI, they also mentioned that DPI and the Wisconsin Center for Educational Research are developing assessment tools that are aligned with the new competencies. So Wisconsin, in the term competency is a deliberate attempt as opposed to standards, and that language, standards versus competency, is trying to, instead of thinking about accountability, they're really trying to talk about what we're trying to teach towards rather than what we're trying to hold students accountable to. It's a different approach, which is the language is very deliberate. And so DPI and the Wisconsin Center for Educational Research they're developing new assessment tools that are aligned with those competencies. We're very excited to see what happens in the near future with their work, because that will shorten the learning curve for many districts, including us. Other tools, and they'll even mention this, they are informative, but really not the package yet. And that's really the challenge, is we're all looking for the package because we want to make sure that we're taking care of our kids. And so until we do so, this tool, having that student engagement measurement, is one of our better tools because we've asked the actual students for their feedback. However, it has its limitations. And some of the research we've looked at, really until you get to about age 11, do you really start to have some data that's reliable. Those younger kids, the time of their experience gets quite a bit muddled, the vocabulary, things like that, really until you get to that later elementary, and that's really when we begin our assessment, is that grade 5. But really when you get younger than grade 5, and we want to know more about our students, and so the work that's going on also right now is we have a social emotional learning committee that began its work last month. And their job is to really work on aligning our learning goals in social emotional learning and our assessment tools. And so we recognize the tools that we have in front of us, but they're really working on that articulation and really trying to go at this strategically. It's exhausting work, and we need assistance from the type of work I mentioned from that DPI is doing with the Wisconsin Center for Educational Research. But right now we know that some of our strongest tools are talking to our students, which is what we're going to report on now. The scale, and this is an important scale, is it's a 4-point frequency scale, so you can't get lower than 1. So rarely or never is a 1, and then almost always is a 4. The benchmark is to get to 3. Really, if you're at 3, that's considered a very high score. Now, 3 out of 4 is in some 75% doesn't seem high, but it's quite strong in this area because students are saying often that's their experience. So we've tracked over, and again, I'm going to show you strengths, and I'm going to show you areas of growth. We are strong as a district, and I think this is a pretty exciting presentation for me to show because our students are telling us they're feeling that support. So when we talk about areas of strength, these are the things that rise to the top. The areas of challenges these are still areas that are strong, but they're our lower ones. Something had to be lowest, right? So we wanted you to show the areas that we really need to focus on as well. So you can see that academic support, and the academic support questions, we're not going to blitz you with questions. We're going to try to keep this at a high level, but they really focus on inclusion in classroom discussions and really having an encouraging teacher. This is what our district is known for, right? The relationships between adults and adults, adults and children, and children and children. I see some nods, and I think we know this as one of our strengths, and even as you were talking about your last topic, the things you were talking about are those relationships and making sure that voices are heard. In the areas of cognitive engagement, these are the areas that are some of our lower scoring ones. So class experience left the list this year. That means fun, interesting, and challenging. So that is actually scoring a bit higher in relation to other items. And relevance, connecting content to the outside world, other subjects in my future, is still an area that, that we need to work on in relation to some of the ones that are scoring a bit stronger. We think of academic and career planning. We are looking at ways to be more purposeful in the future, but as a strong area to help us support that, and we'll revisit that topic in just a moment. So when we look at that social emotional engagement, you can see over the past few years, self-management has been on that list of strength, and self-management questions typically are talking about being nice to others, teachers, peers in the school, and prioritizing schoolwork. So again, as a district, very strong in those areas that we hope to see from our students. And as we look at the core values, and someone asked me earlier, they're like, how do all these things tie together? They do. And if you look at the language there about caring for each other and then seeing what's on the wall, you'll see hopefully a good, strong connection. So future aspirations has been an area as well of strength in the past, and that's the feel good about future opportunities. So the irony is sometimes on the cognitive end, if I go back, an area about relevance scored lower on the cognitive, but on the social emotional actually scored high. So sometimes, as we know, with getting feedback from people, we sometimes see some what we look like are contradictions. Areas for growth, so these are some of them that score lower, and relationship management has been an area that has scored low for us in each of these, again, in relation. And that's how connected kids feel to each other. So still have strong support from their families. And this is actually an area that, as we talk with our consultants, is an area that we actually expect to score lower, because as our students are in adolescence, we actually expect to see some separation. So that growing separation by age in adolescence is in part due to this. So it doesn't actually, even though it scores lower, isn't the worst thing in the world. And then the other one, acceptance, is those questions that involve connected to the school, feeling respected and recognized for contributions. Involvement I actually left off, and so I'm going to just grab involvement for you, so I apologize. I thought I had that in there, and I so involvement are it's trying my best and coming prepared, and attending school activities, and participating in extracurriculars. So it's a bit of a swath about during the school day and then beyond the school day. And so we're seeing that one kind of peek its head for the first time. So something that we'll pay attention to, and getting to the root cause, that's a little bit harder to tease out. So our overall engagement scores, again, remember using that 3 as a benchmark. So the overall engagement actually ticked up. So it used to be 3.10. It's been a pretty steady number. The national benchmark stayed the same. So that national benchmark score is from other districts that now, again, use this tool. So this is a bit self-selecting. This is not a random selection of districts. These are districts that already choose social and emotional measures such as student engagement. So we're playing with people of similar thought and purpose as our district. And even among those peers, we score higher than the national benchmark, which is has a pretty several, tens of thousands of students in the bank. The social emotional engagement, the cognitive engagement and social emotional, if we separate those two, we were steady this year at 2.95 for cognitive, but we saw a slight increase in social emotional to 3.19. So the benchmark score we're seeing is being consistent, and our own cognitive one stayed consistent, but the social emotional one for the district had that slight increase, about 0.03. So then we started looking at our subgroups. We did remove the data for Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander because the sample size is so small, only represent 10 students. Typically, we use the DPI as our guideline anytime we get under 20. We remove the data from those groups. And so you'll see several things on here. All subgroups in this group have a higher social emotional engagement than a cognitive. So again, continues to be an area of strength across different groups, male, female, students, any student of color or ethnicity. And my last group, the yes, no, we don't have I believe it's Hispanic. That somehow got clipped off on there. So this is students of color in the top group, the middle group, and then the bottom group, and I'm just going to double check just to make sure I give you the right information, and I apologize that got clipped off. is our Hispanic, yes. No, nope, it is, I'm going to have to get back, I will have to send a note to Dr. Hardebeck. I'm not sure which, I don't want to mischaracterize that group that's not Hispanic on the bottom. The gifted ed, these labels did stay on the left side. Gifted ed, enrollment in special education, English learner. So no means you are not gifted student or labeled in our system as gifted. Yes means that you are. Enrollment in special ed is no. And yes means that you are identified special ed, and likewise with English learner. The differential for the special ed group here under yes for cognitive engagement, this is actually quite a small differential for overall between cognitive and social emotional. And you can see but the students for English learners that their cognitive engagement is actually the one group that is higher than for social emotional. So this is a group that clearly has very, very engaged on the cognitive set of questions that we asked. So some of our key findings, our students are engaged. We have a very high level of engagement. In addition, that engagement is very strong in addition to the fact that if you look over behind me, we have an increasing number of students taking significant number of advanced placement courses, dual enrollment, transcript to credit, and et cetera. Even though we're still seeing high levels of social emotional engagement, at the same time, we have our students really challenging themselves on the cognitive end quite significantly. Those benchmarks continue to exceed the national benchmark, and we really continue to demonstrate that really strong social and emotional engagement. So our next steps, we're sharing this data with our leadership team at the district level, and also with the principals. We also have site level results for each building, and then we work with each of the buildings, especially with the new multi-level system of support. We have an updated school improvement plan that I believe that you heard about back in the spring. This set of data is part of those conversations when those buildings work on their school improvement planning. In cognitive engagement, you can see, as I mentioned earlier, that focus around academic career planning, and then culturally responsive practices, which we talked about earlier as well, especially with that literacy work last year, is a big piece of our social emotional engagement to make sure our students feel connected to the work that they're doing. All right, questions that you have?
Well, I'll start. Thank you, by the way, for this. I'm interested, as we talk about demographic information, and you talk about the social and emotional engagement and the new committee. Yeah. I'm interested in, as a district, looking at protective factors for LGBTQ youth, and interested in seeing if with the upper grades in this kind of a survey, we could have that self-identified status listed. And I think that would be something important for us as a district to see and to work on. But I'm just wondering, I'm sure that these are conversations that have taken place, but I'm just wondering if you could maybe address that just a little bit and talk about that.
So right now with the students, they do not self-identify on this survey because part of it is that we pull the data from the student information system, and then each student has a login tied to their data. We don't actually see individual student data. That's all on the back end with K-12 Insights, so we have an agreement not to see that. Could we ask students to self-identify in the survey? That is a possibility. So one of the things we could do is reach out to our vendor and ask for some advice, because we may not be the only district with that question.
Well, yeah, and I certainly respecting the privacy of the students. Right. I just know for us to have every tool we could possibly have to, as they have here, create supportive environments for everyone, knowing that information would be helpful. And I know that the Youth Risk Behavior Survey and some of the CDC stuff is now incorporating more and more of that. Sure. It's still, there's a lot of work to be done on it, but
we can do some background work and then get back to you on that.
Okay, thank you. Anyone, Commissioner Bika?
Does K-12 Insight offer some higher level statistical analyses. I'm probably not telling you anything you don't already know, but these are descriptive statistics, just the averages. We don't know where there are statistically significant differences, and I think that's pretty critical when you're talking about what are our results.
Yep. So when you want to know statistically significant differences, can you talk to me a little bit more about, are you talking at the question level, or are you, or are you
No,
talking
with-
in terms of groups? Tell me a little more.
You just have to ask them to, of the averages that you've
Yep,
presented, to
yep.
compare those to see,
Oh,
you know, so just because you can see a difference in a mean, doesn't
Right.
mean it's a statistically
correct.
significant
So you want to
difference.
know more statistics on, some more analysis on that particular piece?
Yeah,
We can
it's-
work on that with them. They've done that before for us on a couple of different projects.
Because it's, you don't want to, you know, you don't really want to go out talking about this is higher and lower when it's just the mean.
It is.
And
You're
so
right.
what you could have is possibly
A
actually
big wide
no
variance.
difference
Yep.
between the groups. Yeah.
So, I believe, couple things, and I know, our contact there, I think they do some, so typically when we receive the data, we have a conversation about, so sometimes they do some of that work and don't share because some districts don't ask for it. We
Yeah.
can ask for that.
Yeah.
Typically what we do though is we will have a conversation about, some of the qualitative versions of what you just talked about. So typically if they would have seen something unusual, let's say you just have a spread that looks like really low, really high group, in that really high group, there's just enough population to bring that average up. They would typically notify us, but we can ask for them for some more of the statistics on that. That can be something we can do.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. Anyone from the public? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Schmidt. And next on our agenda is a discussion and presentation about the mentor program in the district. Good evening.
First year of our mentor-mentee program. So provide you an update. You heard previously about the establishment of the mentor program, some of the items that we were going to mentor our mentees with. And tonight I'd like to show you some of the perception data at least, and then also remind you why we put the mentor program in the first place based on some of our work with the Hanover Institute. So first, I'll show you that the mentor program, again, is aligned to your strategic plan to promote student achievement and to support and develop high-quality staff. One of the most significant things of a mentor program is to develop the folks that you bring on board, either new to the district or more likely new to teaching, so developing that critical talent pool that you dedicate your resources towards so they grow professionally. That's an obligation of a successful school district, and I think, at least I hope, the first year of the mentor program will ensure your trust in at least the first steps of the mentor program. So we used research from Hanover Institute over a series of reports, metadata that they shared with us, compiled from 2014 to 2017. And in there, Hanover shares with us, and we've talked about this previously with the board, that student achievement by and large tends to be on an upward trajectory as you can retain your staff and that you can develop them professionally in all the different iterations of whatever your district's initiatives are at the time, so that you've got staff that is aligned and calibrated to do the work that your district has identified as important. For example, we're in the midst of going into year 3 now of a literacy within supporting learning environment work, right? So as you bring new staff in, as you're in the midst of that work, they can move the initiative along. That's an example. Could be PBIS at one specific building if it's not found in their school improvement plan. So that is some of the underpinnings of the value of the mentorship program. Teacher commitment and retention. We know that that is a significant portion of the mentor-mentee program. Nationally, and this is just, I apologize, Dr. Bika, an average, that roughly a third to 40% of new staff will leave a district in year 1 to 3. Right, so we know all the costs associated with that. Our Human Resources Department can tell you the cost of going out interviewing, bringing in new folks and repopulating them. Building principals can tell you there is certain amount of resources that have to be dedicated in the building to bringing somebody on and drafting them in. And then of course that disruption of the professional that's in front of the student. You like to have be predictable, reliable, consistent, and let a team grow together. Our mentor program, one of the designs of that is to then retain those folks that we go out and recruit to bring into the district that are a team that we want to develop. So anyway, the mentor program, the point of that is to retain the talent that we bring into the district. And then classroom practices. We alluded to this a bit previously, but teachers who have participated in this induction program have been shown to, on the aggregate, achieve with more consistently and show more strength in these areas, keeping students on task, that classroom management practices, adjusting activities to meet the student interests. For example, they just have more arrows in their quiver as they're developed with a veteran instructor, and as you can move the staff person along throughout the year and then hopefully into a second year, be able to increase the depth and breadth of their classroom management skills, maintaining a positive classroom atmosphere and demonstrating successful classroom management. And all those things, again, underpinnings to facilitate student achievement, because you gain back instructional time as the instructor becomes more efficient and apt at their craft. We know that some of the states within the union that have been identified as leaders in building a mentor-mentee program, you'll find that in Ohio, North Carolina, Illinois, New Jersey, and New York. And they have a range of New York and New Jersey of having 1-year statewide programs to Illinois and North Carolina that have 2 and 3, and Ohio require 4 years of mentoring throughout the state. So we use those exemplar areas to help build our mentor program and give you the pathways or the structure that we've got in place. The mentors and mentees were allowed to give, we asked them several occasions to make sure that they give us survey data. We had, so that we can have their voice here present today, and we can react to the quantitative and qualitative value of the mentor program by the people in the field doing the work. We had just over 80, I think it was 81 teachers in the mentor program, and then mentees assigned. And you can see the on the left here, the mentor surveys. And again, this is perception data, but our mentors do tell us that 96% of those folks who mentored qualified the experience as valuable, that 90% agreed that the program had quality. Again, to remind everybody in the room, the expectation was set forth that mentor and mentee would meet at minimum monthly, and they would have time either that we supported with time cards either outside the instructional day, or during the instructional day we would provide a half-day release for mentor and mentee, so that was consistent, predictable, and reliable. And then the mentor and mentee had areas or topics that we identified as the best areas to identify growth in year 1 of instructor in the building. So either different district initiatives, as we talked about, or high quality areas that Hanover helped us identify, such as classroom management, such as constructing cogent reports for parents and reporting as informed by our reporting guidelines, things of those areas. So the greatest impact of the program identified by the mentors, again, all those other things aside, it goes to relationships. It goes to being able to provide guidance, the ongoing, consistent, and predictable communication, and then the co-planning, which is a high leverage area. If you look at the Hattie research of co-planning being very statistically significant in that area. On our mentees tell us that 94% valued the experience and 94% agreed that the program was of quality, and the greatest impact on the mentee, the first-year teacher in our district, was getting specific questions answered, right? So sometimes it could be depth of knowledge 1, like where's the copier, But that's local and immediate and significant to the person who doesn't know where the copier is. And there's someone who can help them find where it is. To things of building relationships amongst staff members, working with parents, working with specific students that may need more love and attention. The conversation, which is an interesting way to frame it, that there's someone to have a conversation with that's safe, predictable, reliable. And while the principal can wear that hat in certain aspects, we know that the mentor coaches and does not evaluate. So fundamentally a different relationship. And then this was interesting and stood out, and I was surprised by this, but that a method to organize and manage a classroom in a consistent and predictable manner. Again, that's something that you'll find our students frequently identify, that we need help with how to manage the stuff, whatever you want to say stuff is, that comes through a school day. So 2017-18 mentor activity overview, we did land on 80 mentor-mentee pairings, sorry, I said 81. A total cost of $105,000, large part of that being either paying for the substitutes for those half-day releases as we talked about, or that time outside the instructional day where we supported with the time card the mentor-mentee pairing. Going forward into 18-19, right now we anticipate 65 new pairings. Cost of that would be approximately $86,000 at this point. If we did a second year, plan on a second year of mentoring, hopefully have a second year of mentoring. For that 80 that we talked about before, that would be a cost of $105,000. So the commitment of a 2-year mentoring program, if we matriculate into year 2, would be a total cost of ownership of $191,000. So that's quick overview. Questions, answers, wonderments, anything I can help you with?
So for the folks who did not find it helpful, the 6% or whatever, do they have the opportunity to leave the program, or?
Yeah, President Lugamil, thank you for that. So at each point, there was opportunities for the mentor and the mentee to give feedback to our, we had a SharePoint area, rudimentary, and we're developing that, but an area where mentors and mentees could communicate with us, and also the principal, of course, always. And there were a couple occasions where we did repair a mentor and mentee for whatever reason. It was, less than 7, I believe it was, but we did have a couple of those.
Sure.
So, and then out of 80 people, you're going to get a little bit of that. So we just find a different mentor or a different mentee to engage in. So we did react to that.
Okay. So. Are there other questions? Commissioner Humbuck-Boyle?
So I'm thinking the second year, if this would continue, would be a little deeper conversation between the mentor and the mentee with SLOs and your building improvement plans and stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So last year, and then we would again going into this year, while we are updating the mentor modules, so there's 4 different modules that our mentor goes through with their training, and in there it helps them with the deliverables to the mentee. Module 3 is going to be, we have revamped it to look more as a primer on the EE, the SLO, the PPG, all things that you find in educator effectiveness. Once upon a time, we were going to do more PDPs, but PDPs have been sunsetted by DPI. And probably, maybe, we should have landed it with all things that are Charlotte Danielson initially. This has been well received by the few folks that we've had around the table to help advise us with this, and that's administrators, that's staff, that's current mentors. We floated out the revamped Module 3, and so far we've had quite a bit of support for that. So yeah, your point is a valid one, that we would add additional depth. I'm thinking with maybe year 1 as well, but certainly in year 2. So as you've got the management piece isolated now, how do you react to a student that isn't getting it in your class? The DeFore questions is an area that we would coach people along. You find that more certainly in the second year mentoring program.
what kind of content the mentor are consistent in their working with their mentee, centralized information?
We have, I should have brought it with you. We've got a list of different suggested items for September, October, November that the mentor advisory team helped construct, and informed by current mentors, by principals in the teaching and learning department. For example, in September of your first year of mentorship, right? You've got a brand new mentee. So just things like reporting to parents, because we know the first reporting to parent guideline comes up real quick in October. All right, so what does that look like? What in there at the elementary level, certainly there's conversation about standards-based grading. So all mentees would receive that in September or early October with their mentor and mentee. We do a piece of that at the new teacher orientation, and then circled back within year one of the mentor program. So items like that are aligned. If that, I think that's the question that you're asking. So we have a series of them. I should have brought the whole list, but that's an example of. As you get into mid-year, we talk about, okay, you're a first-year teacher, so while we didn't spend as much time in the first year as we will this year in the SLO PPG process, we know that at mid-year you're doing an SLO, student learning objective, and professional growth goal update to your principal. So the mentor can help coach the mentee about what that conversation might look like. So that's an alignment that all mentees receive from their mentors. And then, of course, the principal has a role in that as well.
Okay, so you were, just logistically, where you're at right now, is you'd like for this to go to the budget committee, and then the budget committee can talk through it and look at what would it look like moving it to next year, and then bring a recommendation to the board? Is that where it's at? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay.
The cost of the total cost of ownership for mentor for year one and year two would be roughly $191,000.
Okay. Any other, Commissioner Boyle?
I just have a question. If in fact, looking at the budget, it didn't go for year two, what would happen then for the people that were in the program?
So we would.
Or what would it look like, or
sure.
how would it be different?
So we'd focus our efforts on staff that are in year one. So we would calibrate the mentors that we have to line them up with the new folks that are coming in. The year two folks, mentees, we'd communicate with them that while we're sunsetting that from the district level, the buildings will react to that in different ways. So some buildings may, through their school improvement plan, choose to do some activities to support folks in year two. Some may do a different iteration. So I would suspect that there would be momentum that would continue for those mentors and mentees in year two from the positive momentum that we built in year one. Eventually, I would expect that would be more episodic, wouldn't be as systematic as what we have now.
Can I do a follow-up? So if we are working off a PLC, a professional learning community model, would some of the mentoring be taken care of within that model, given the support that you get within a professional learning community?
Sure, that in addition to, for sure. So there's certain things that we know in that PLC model, that DeFore model, that really focused on the academia of who I'm partnering with, second grade teacher, my chemistry teacher, and there's of course all the things around that, reacting to common assessment data. All right, how do I reteach my students didn't get it, or for example, my students did, and how I can share that. So that's a piece of the current mentoring program. We just add more in different things through that, the 10 different half-day opportunities for the mentor and mentee to work together. Part of the things that they do talk about are the professional learning community work that you would do, reacting to assessments, to the student data in your classroom. That piece of it is present. It doesn't occupy everything that you do, but it is certainly part of it, right?
Okay. Are there any other board member questions or comments?
I can say that $191,000 would be less than 1/2 of the budget allocation.
Do you have a lobbying license?
So Commissioner Amick Boyle, To follow up also on your question, one of the things we did is we created a short web address to our mentor website. So if you type in the district's URL, ecac.us/mentor, you'll see that there's 3 buttons on there. And the first button that's on that has the program overview. And if you page your way down, I think it's around page 6 or so, you'll start to see the year 1 and year 2 suggested list of activities that could occur. And some of the feedback we received from our mentors was that list was so helpful. Because sometimes we put 2 people together, kind of like, okay, what are we going to talk about? That really helped guide those conversations. Can some of those things happen, like you said, in the PDIP time, or possibly? This was our experiment into that 2-year 4A, but that will give you an idea of what we had intended for 2 years. The general mentor program information. That'll pull up an overview of the entire program, and then if you work your way down, year 1 starts around, let's see, the mentor training is on page 5, and then when you start getting into the middle of page 6, you'll start to see year 1, and then as you get toward right at the very bottom of page 9, it says year 2, and then the topics continue on page 10.
Yeah, I should have added that link to this, but apologize for oversight on that.
All right. Anyone in the public who'd like to say anything? Okay. Oh.
My name is Mark Goings. I live at E17450 County Road V, Augusta. In looking at the mentor program, when this was rolled out by the district, we, as a district, rolled out, as far as I know, one of the most robust mentoring programs of actually supporting that learning. And it came at a time when, as a district, we were having large turnovers of staff. So you have a whole bunch of new people coming in. Also at a state and national level, we have people going into education going down. And so it's our new resource of that new hire. It's so important that we bring them into our system as positively as possible. And so on one hand, I would say, yes, with the mentor-mentee system, a lot of it is helping that new person learn the complexities of our curriculums, of our families, of our needs, and all of that. But also through those relationships, it's a chance for those conversations to happen with that new person who's also bringing in some of the, well, what about, or the could we, and that's a way to bring some of the richness that they have into our district also. And so I would strongly suggest that at least, I know we're looking at should we do a second year or not do a second year. I would highly recommend you at least strongly look at that second year, because I think we need to see where this program could go, because I think it could end up positively impacting all of our students for a long, long time. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And I don't see anyone else, so thank you, Mr. Oldenburg.
Thank you.
And that takes us to our final agenda item for the night, the superintendent's interim progress report.
Thank you. Thank you. So this is my annual update on the superintendent's goals, which is really an update on our work on the strategic plan and where my goals are aligned to your goals. I like to begin by saying that of all the reports that I do for you, I think this is one of my favorite reports, because I get to talk about the work of our staff in our schools and also the staff in the district office. This is all a team effort, and the work that we do as a staff is really about taking the 3 goals that you established for the strategic plan, the priorities that you established in the strategic plan, and making those priorities and goals come alive. So, just as a review of the goals, you'll see that my goals are more action-oriented. Looking at those multiple measures, how do we make that whole child approach come into play? How do we prepare all students for post-secondary success so that all students are college and career ready, there are gaps are closing, and that our graduates recognize behaviors characteristic of successful adults. And we're going to talk about that, how that plays out in our priorities. I think in Goal 2, we talk about how we're going to do work, how we're going to support schools, how we're going to try to build a positive culture based on research-based principles of teaching and learning. And this is something we keep coming back to. What does the research tell us? Dave's presentation about mentoring was an example of that. Jim's presentation about student engagement is an example of how we look at that research to guide our actions. And then we want to develop collaborative relationships with everyone that we work with and that we work for. So our preparation for all students for post-secondary success is really grounded in our whole child approach. And if you go around this spiral, you will see the priorities that you have established within your strategic plan. We have some challenges, and those challenges I think revolve around the increasing expectations that we have for our students, that our community has for us, that we have for each other, and in a time of dwindling resources. And I've talked to you a little bit about this before, but I think what we're seeing more and more is that public schools are operating in a very competitive environment, and we are constantly competing for resources with sectors, other sectors of public services. It could be transportation, could be Medicaid, could be other public entities. And in an open enrollment environment, alternate enrollments, part-time enrollments, we find ourselves tracking who leaves us, who stays with us, and who joins us throughout the year. And we find ourselves having to prove ourselves every day to our community that we are a high-performing school district that not only promotes academic achievement, but that we're also interested in the social emotional development of our students, that we see them as individuals, that we try to meet each of their needs. And this is really, I think, the foundation of our whole child approach. All of this brings value, but it also brings an added cost to the district. In the time when we are still operating under revenue caps and funding formulas, vouchers, our required support for private and parochial schools, and it really hasn't kept pace. That funding formula and that revenue limit hasn't kept pace with the development of our school district, even though we were able to pass a successful referendum. So in developing our operating budget, we've tried to have a very open process, and we are constantly trying to work on our communication about that process, not only between the board and the superintendent and the staff, but also with our community. So I think one example of this that has come up in our discussions with each other are those budget items that trigger maybe an increase in resources, use of resources, or perhaps a decrease in the use of resources, and being able to make everyone aware that those steps are taking place. So items or programs that might be examples of this would be our 5-year capital plan and the discussions that we had about the cost of the culinary project and some of our improvements to our buildings, or staffing, or the proposal that we received from Indy about the Little Red Nature Center. or Spanish immersion, or any of the bids that we have for services and projects. You know, and I think since we've had our discussions in January, we've had about 75 of these items brought to the attention of the board. So, you know, we're trying to improve that communication and that learning about our budget and everything that we do. I think the next challenge that we face is connected to our first challenge. And because if we're going to meet increased expectations, there has to be a little bit of a psychological shift. And we talked about this last year. We know that a bell curve is what occurs naturally, normally in nature, if there are no interventions taken. And what we want to do is to move all of our students to that J curve, where everyone is moving up to meet standards in academic achievement and social emotional growth. And this seems to be kind of a no-brainer. I mean, why wouldn't we want all of our students to succeed? Why wouldn't we want all of our students to meet standards? But there are a few barriers. And I think one of the biggest challenges is that, one, it's kind of changing our own behavior and our own expectations, and then finding those strategies that will move students ahead and push them ahead. And that's where the research comes in. But I want you to look at that line that goes through that curve about an overall performance level. And you can see that before you get to that increase, there's a little bit of a what's known as a performance dip and in any implementation. And sometimes when we try something new and we try something that we have been told will work and it doesn't work out, people get very discouraged. And they feel that perhaps they didn't quite get the result that they wanted. And so there's a little bit of nurturing that goes on and regrouping to find out, one, is it a real performance dip, or did we do something incorrectly? And so I think we have to be prepared for that as we make these psychological shifts, because it takes patience and perseverance to make system-wide changes that will ultimately get us to where we want to go with all students. And the bottom line in all of this is really about equity. It's about moving all of our students, about having opportunities and access for all of our students so that we can help them move forward to meet their goals and dreams. So when we look at the strategic plan, we talk about priorities, we talk about the challenges, and we talk about the assessments and measures. And so this will be kind of the umbrella that I'm going to use as we look at the following slides. Every slide will highlight a priority. It will talk about the actions that we are taking to operationalize this priority, and then we're going to talk about how we assess whether or not or how we're meeting those priorities. So in our, I'm going to take you back. So for those of you who are new board members or newly on the board, 5 years ago we did a systems assessment. And one of the things that we learned from that system assessment is that we had lots and lots and lots and lots of initiatives. And one of the recommendations was that we focus on a few strategies that had a high impact in terms of having a number of components, but also having been shown to bring about results for students. And so we've chosen to focus on 6 of these high impact strategies. I shared with you, or at least I brought people to share with you, the work that has been done on the multi-level systems of support. This is really our framework for equity. It's our framework for intervention. It's our framework for kind of customizing, if for want of a better word, strategies to meet the needs of students. We have been working on our foundational skills with literacy and math in the elementary grades, with the idea that we would hit those benchmarks where students are at grade level in 8th grade in reading and math, and in their grade level in 3rd grade. And this has been a very, very difficult goal and priority to meet. We've been using culturally responsive practices, and we've done training throughout the district with all of our employees about how these responsive practices help us as a district and help us to work with our families and our students. Academic and career planning, which is a state initiative, fits kind of almost perfectly into our academic achievement because it draws on that relevancy factor of students, helping students to set goals for themselves, identify their passions, identify their aspirations, and be able to have a plan to work toward that. And then finally, we have been trying to provide some type of post-secondary experience for each of our high school students before they graduate from high school. And I want to qualify that by saying that we've been trying to provide post-secondary experiences where students experience success, whether it's through AP courses, transcripted credits, youth apprenticeships, internships, volunteer work, some way that we can get them, you know, into their next step, so that they leave us feeling prepared and that they have confidence in their own skills and abilities. In terms of measurements, these are things that you're familiar with. Everything starting with PALS, Ford exam, the ACT, advanced placement. All of those things kind of take us to, like, how are we doing achievement-wise? And it's going to vary from year to year with our groups, but we should be able to see some trends. We talked about how standardized testing or standardized measurements are not the be-all, end-all for measuring the success of our students. And, you know, I think as teachers are working on their own formative and summative assessments, they're looking for other ways in the classroom to measure the progress of students and to help students measure their own progress. And our strategic priority too, student social and emotional growth. This is where we've had a lot of conversation over the last year. This part about MLSS, this really, I can't quite get rid of this little thing. There it goes. The MLSS crosses both academic achievement and the social emotional learning. And we use our school improvement planning to operationalize this or to make the MLSS come alive for schools. We shared with you earlier in the year a new format for our school improvement planning. And we have piloted that format in 4 schools, Prairie Ridge, Mans, North Star, and Memorial. And now we're at a point where we'll be sharing that work and bringing other schools on board with that new school improvement plan. So within the school improvement plans, we're looking for strategies that follow our PBIS program, which is kind of a way of teaching expectations and helping students to meet those expectations, building a positive school climate. We have a school-based mental health, and next in this upcoming school year, for the first time, we'll be training all of our secondary staff on mental health first aid, which is just like real first aid It is, if a student's in crisis, our secondary staff will know how to kind of help that student manage the crisis until they can see a mental health professional. And we're quite excited about this work and the potential that it has to support our students. Jim talked a little bit in the engagement report about how the district has created a social and emotional learning committee. This is in response to your direction to me about identifying indicators that would show our progress, and then being able to analyze those indicators to see which ones were contributing most to student growth. I will tell you, it is a lot easier to identify indicators, particularly since DPI has come out with their guidelines on social and emotional, but the guidance to us has been to be very cautious about how we measure social and emotional learning, because frankly, we don't have validated tools. And so let me tell you what, we have been working with a number of agencies and research groups. Jim mentioned CASEL. We've also worked with the Wisconsin RTI Center, the Research Center. We've worked with a number of research agencies across the nation. There's been a lot of networking. Last year we sent a team to the National Statistics Foundation, and there was a lot of work done at that conference about talking about how you might measure social emotional learning. And this is a big topic right now nationally, and people are really grappling with the idea of, one, what do we do to promote social and emotional learning and growth, and then two, how do we measure it? So we have a committee that's working on this, and I'm understanding that tomorrow they're going to come forward with some recommendations, just one day too late. We've had a long history of working with nonviolent crisis intervention and having training for staff, and we have a number of service initiatives. And these service initiatives go from everything from programs that support our homeless students to our nursing program, to our academic and career and counseling. All of these kind of services for students play a part in helping us to promote our social and emotional learning. These are some of the measurements that we've talked about and that have been recommended to us in terms of maybe trying to get a snapshot of what social and emotional learning might look like in our district. And there are some more measures. But I do want to emphasize to you that this is an area in terms of measurement which there is little agreement right now. We've talked a lot about our collaborative cultures, and I'm just going to give you, this is just a kind of a small list. It's not inclusive. But we've established a number of district committees, everything from our literacy initiatives to our SEL initiatives to discipline programs to how we run our athletic programs. There are all kinds of district committees. There's wellness, there's communication, they're the instructional technology leaders. All of these committees coming together that are made up of representation from the different levels and from the different schools. And they include staff, and sometimes they include family members or community members. We have our building improvement committees, and I think of these committees as the kind of nuts and bolts of committees in each of the buildings. We have one here at the administration building where staff can bring forward concerns about the day-to-day operation. We have a format for addressing those concerns and for responding to those concerns and for documenting whether or not those concerns were responded to. Of course, the school improvement planning, we have been trying to move to some strategies that involve not only the school leadership teams in school improvement planning, but the whole staff. And with our new school improvement planning tool, there are some surveys that we will be asking all staff to take that will contribute to things like the professional development plans within the buildings. We have school leadership teams, and they, I think they act as not only planners, but they monitor the data within the school and they report back to their various teams. We have meet and confer. We're still one of the few districts that still conduct meet and confer. And I find this a very valuable tool in that we have good conversations about concerns, but that this group also acts as an advisory to me. So it's very helpful. We have school board committees, and we have a new format for selecting members for our school board committees, such as demo and trends, or our equity committees that we have in place. People can apply to join those committees, and we advertise those committees widely. And then we have our surveys, both with our families and with our staff and with our students. And finally, their staff and I here at the district office, and I would say particularly for me, I go out and I meet annually with school faculty and with school leadership teams in the buildings. And that is it's a very informative and valued experience for me, because I get to hear from staff kind of without a filter about things that are on their mind, and they're not shy about sharing. So how do we measure our collaborative cultures? Well, we have some frameworks that help teams at the building level to determine what stage of development they are in their professional learning communities. We have the school improvement plans, which kind of specify not only what the plan is for the school improvement plan, but also who's been involved in that planning and what role they play in the school improvement plan. We have the documentation of the BIC minutes. We have the SIR and the TFI, which are two surveys that we will be using in the school improvement planning process. This one, the SIR, is designed to get feedback from the leadership team about the needs of the school, and this one is to get feedback from the entire staff, particularly in the area of professional development and the kind of professional development they think will help them move the school improvement plan forward. We have a return rate for our engagement survey, which has been steadily increasing. We try to recognize staff as much as possible, and we require minutes and attendance reporting from the committees at all levels. So we are going to high quality staff, and we are, Ms. Marks has been working on attracting and retaining highly qualified educators in each classroom. Certainly our mentor program is an example of that. I think the fact that our retention rates I don't know how to say this, they're moving in the right direction. We're seeing fewer and fewer people leave us. At one point, I think it was somewhere between 10 and 12%. Is that right, Ms. Marks? And now we've brought it down, and we're somewhere between 3 and 6%. So that's good news. We believe that our professional development and instructional planning calendar is an attraction for people coming to work in the district, because we are one of the few districts that provide time within the workday for all staff to work together and collaborate. We have kind of reviewed and revised our national board certification process to help more teachers who are interested in getting this certification a way to work together through this demanding process. You've been very instrumental in helping us to develop a competitive salary and benefits package, and I think that the benefits package that we have can't be underestimated, because oftentimes when Kmark sits down with staff to try to recruit them to the district, it is our benefits package that makes the difference. We have our mentor program, we have our school improvement plans, and then our measures are our retention rates, our survey results, our family climate rating of schools, the feedback we get from our mentors and our mentees, the number of staff we have participating in professional development, our classroom size data, the Students in Educator Rising program, which is a new program to the district, and the staffing data by school and level, FTEs, years of experience, movement in and out of the district. And then finally, with our strategic priority number 5, our partnerships with families in the community, we have our District Parent Advisory Council, our Special Education PTA, our Policy and Governance Subcommittees, and our school parent groups. And, you know, I see this as being part of the partnership with our families and community, but I also think it's an indicator of the collaboration that takes place within our district. We've really tried to shift away from that idea of parent involvement in, you know, the volunteers are important and all of the activities that they do are important, but we want to have strategies that help our parents get engaged in the planning of their students' education, their child's education, and that's where we think the academic and career planning will play a big part. We've had a really increased footprint in terms of our appearance at community events. And we will often like to ask you to stop by at some of those community events, and I really want to commend the staff in the teaching and learning department, because they have been the people who have manned many of these community events. We've been able to attract and retain a number of community partnerships, and that really came home to me when Governor Walker came to visit with the youth apprenticeship programs, because we were able to highlight our partnership with RCU, with Mayo, with Reality Works, just with a number of places where our students are having a youth apprenticeship and intern experiences. And to me, those are the kind of partnerships that really reach out to students and involve students in not only in maybe future careers, but also give them a link to the community. I remember like being at the RCU visit, and the students talked about they were, you know, it's a kind of a very competitive process to get one of those RCU internships, but they talked about how their career goals had been set by that experience, and whether they were going to go into banking or finance or some type of business, how RCU had prepared them for that. And the number of students at RCU talked about in having come back to work at RCU, having had those experiences and gone off to college. So, you know, you kind of start to begin to see that, you know, those experiences really make a difference for students. And I think also for our business partnerships. And then we've instituted a number of program advisories, and you've heard from some of those advisories this year. We have our hospitality committee, we've got our technology committee. We just have a number of advisories that are kind of playing a role in terms of telling us what those programs should look like from a business perspective and from a community perspective. And then as we look at how we might measure those, again, we have listed these items. And really when you kind of look at these, it's about participation. It's about counting, you know, numbers of people who are there. But I think this also plays out a little bit in our family survey and the feedback that we get in our family surveys. So that's kind of where we are on the strategic plan, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions now.
Thank you, Dr. Harbeck, for a very detailed and thoughtful presentation. So I hope you can email us a copy of it too, because I'm going to have to reread it. I think it's a lot. It'll be in board docs, great. But in a lot of the things that you said that really resonated, and also I think that your passion for our district and for our kids is very clear, and I thank you for that. And all of the various initiatives under these priorities and the work that's being done, it's such a testament to the very hard work that our staff is doing every day, and can't say thank you enough to all those folks. So, but I'll open it up if anyone has questions or comments. Commissioner Vu and then Commissioner Harder.
I know this can be very complicated to look at the actual implementation, but I'm just curious when the action step were developed and when we might be anticipate to see the actual rating or the data.
So, as you know, a lot of our achievement data is embargoed, and we found out today that our school report card data will be embargoed until probably sometime in November. So when that data is released, we will immediately get that on the board agenda and share that with you. When we do the opening of schools report in October, we will go through the other data because we're in the process of gathering that data right now to compare with what we've done in the past and to establish baseline data in areas where we have not measured in the past.
May I still follow? Yeah. Like I said, it's very complex, but is there a way to simplify so that we can see the comparison? For example, last year around this time, what were things like? Right now, what are they like? And maybe choose a few data that can be compared, maybe 2 years in a row.
So I would ask you to think back to when we did the opening of schools report last year. We talked a little bit about achievement data, and we usually give it to you in kind of 4-year chunks, and we try to show you the comparison from what we were doing, 4 years ago, and if we're making progress or if we're not making progress. One of the things that you had asked me to do this year in the opening of schools report is to pinpoint areas where we're making significant progress, where we're making progress, or where we have kind of fallen back. And we will certainly be doing that with the data in October in all of the areas that we report to you.
Yeah, I'd also like to just thank you for that report and also echo the thanks to the whole team here in the district office that works on this stuff every day. It's an incredible job, and the whole staff in the district too that obviously contributes enormously to these outcomes. I was also going to ask, I think we talked a little bit in that opening schools report, I think was the report we were talking about when we were discussing a little bit more disaggregation of data, and I think there were some complications with that potentially. Are we on track? Do we feel like we can get a little better read on sort of achievement gap questions and things like that in the next reports that we've got coming up?
Well, as we shared with you in the school improvement plan, we've asked schools to kind of start tracking their data in that way in their school improvement planning, and then we can take that out of the school improvement plans and also out of our data warehouse and give you some comparisons, particularly in terms of our gaps. I can tell you that from our preliminary data that we do in terms of preparing for our summative assessments, we're seeing gaps, and we're seeing gaps in two major areas. One is with gender, differences in achievement between boys and girls, or young men and young women, and we're also seeing gaps according to socioeconomics. So that's what we saw kind of in our diagnostic data, and we expect to see that in our summative data as well. And that, I think, will also help to focus the work. I think we're going to have to do some, have some deep conversations and some research about those differences with boys and girls, and also continue our work with our disadvantaged students and the supports that we need for them. So those are two areas that have popped up for us.
Are there any other questions or comments? Anyone in the audience who'd like to make a comment? Okay. Well, thank you, Dr. Hardebeck. Okay, that brings us to our last item, which is requests for future agenda items. I first, before I forget, I want to say welcome to Kim, Ms. Kohler, and enjoy your new nameplate. Welcome to your first board meeting with us, and we're here to support you, so welcome. And I'll just also say our August meetings will primarily, we're going to be working on budget as well as revenue. So I'll look forward to those in the month of August. But are there any other board members who have future agenda items? Commissioner Humboldt-Boyle.
I just wanted to bring up the information for the board. I think it'd be kind of fun to share in open form because I know you've been working on this, but I'd like to have some information on our connection to the Confluence. What will it look like, and what are we, how are we connected with that? I think it would be fun for the board to know that. And then I'm wondering if at some point we could put a tour together for the board or something so that we could maybe see it, unless people have already seen it. I don't know. Okay.
Okay. Any other items? Okay. And do we know who our next person is for agenda setting? Okay. Which one? Okay. Okay, perfect. All right, well, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye. We're adjourned.
This program was brought to you by a cooperation between Newsworks and the Eau Claire Area School Board. Newsworks is made possible by continuing community support. If you would like to volunteer or make a donation, please contact us via phone at 715-839-5067 or online at valleymediaworks.org.